Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for January 29, 2018. We'll begin with a special order calendar. Decision items. Item number 1, 49929BZ, 24870 Horace Harding Expressway, Queens.
Okay. Photos were provided, as were plans, but I actually couldn't figure out the difference between the plans that were provided for the first hearing and this one, so if others could figure it out, that's good. Photo 4 shows what I think is a collapsed fence behind the kiosk, which needs to be replaced. There is a plan that shows the landscaping that, and a photograph that makes it look pretty sparse, but the plan doesn't show the landscaping at all. It just says landscaping, so it needs to describe it. But in order to see kind of what things we're looking at, I went onto Google Satellite, and I have to say that from space, the planting looks fabulous. It's like a French formal garden. It's like the only thing missing is fountains. So, you know, from space, it's appreciated anyway. I don't know about from street level. Anybody else?
No, I actually didn't have any issues on that.
Okay.
That sounds so
See, look, 3 little.
Yeah.
All right, so we're
Okay.
good. We're not reopening a Google.
No,
Good to
no,
know
no.
on that one. Okay, fine. Item number 2, 2016-4255BZ, 4801 Ocean Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, they requested deferral to get, and they have a ZRD1 to permit height measurement from the base flood elevation, which was denied, right? So, so this ZRD1 denial is actually one of many reasons why the board is now asking for ZRD1s and CCD1s of applications that were submitted prior to January 16th, I think was the date. Because of things like this, the board says one thing, the applicant insists on another thing, and the Department of Buildings has whatever the views of the Department of Buildings has, and they're the ones who just interpret and decide what those texts mean. So, yeah. Okay.
Item number 3, 23501BZ, 2009 Mermaid Avenue, Brooklyn.
So they were supposed to have submitted something by Friday, and they submitted nothing. So, because we just heard this last week. So, and they were supposed to submit some things quite small, or we wouldn't have asked them to submit. I couldn't access my notes from last week.
We're also checking with the records unit, just to make sure maybe it didn't make it into the SharePoint. We don't know.
Okay, but, you know, presumably somebody from the applicant is here, and then they can follow up with that.
What we had asked for, provide the signage chart, signage analysis on the plan, provide photos of the landscaping from the building and along the perimeter and the street tree replacement status, and also ask them to key the photos to the plan. Those were the things that we had asked them.
All right, I'm emailing Todd now.
Okay. Yeah, because that's actually
Sorry, I didn't see
surprising.
that.
I think he would have gotten that in, so it may have hit the wrong button or something like
It was
that.
just updating the information. We were not
Right.
asking for any changes.
Yeah. He certainly would have let us know. Okay.
Continued hearing items. Item number 4, 6594BZ, 14402 Jewel Avenue, Queens.
At our last hearing on this was in September, and at that hearing, nothing was provided, and we threatened to dismiss the case for failure to prosecute. So this adjournment request for that date was denied. The adjournment request for that date was denied. So in response, photos were provided showing the signage modified to be a single signboard, which is what we've been waiting for literally months. with inserts, that sign located on Main Street side of the building, and then they installed a new pylon sign, I guess kind of to match stylistically for the corner on Jewel. And a photo was supplied to show the trash containers now located within the property line behind the garden. No photos were supplied to show the condition of the sidewalk along Main Street, which was the subject of many of the hearings, and in particular where the medical sample boxes would be located because they were just putting them on the street, which is not okay. The drawings also don't indicate the medical boxes. So I was looking at the PDF, and I don't know if other people are having problems with this, but it was like an active PDF, and depending on where I had my hand on my computer, there was either landscaping on Main Street or there wasn't. So I don't actually know if that is a layer that was on or turned off or whatever, so see, you don't have it either, and I think that's an error. So if you touch around with it, when I touched around with the pointer, all of a sudden landscaping would sort of fade in, fade out, but I couldn't get it to hold. So I don't know what the plan is now on Main Street. They should bring hard copies because sometimes we get these defective PDFs.
My understanding was that section of that so-called the
Main Street frontage there.
that was part of not the property. That was one of the reasons we had asked them to move the trash compactors, so so any of the landscaping that would be proposed would be on city property.
So we weren't specifically objecting to landscaping that is or was on city property. It was specifically trash and medical waste or medical samples. So that's why I don't know, but I think also when you look at that drawing, there's something wrong with how it's describing the property line. Like it's faded away, it's gone. So I think it's underneath a layer, and that's why what we're looking at isn't the actual situation. So we need clarity for that. We also need photographs because we need to see that it's maintained. We also had a comment about the, let's see, a year ago we asked for a survey, which was never provided, and for plans to clearly indicate the location of the use group 4 uses at the cellar and first floors, and use group 6B at the second floor. Also, none of those were done, and that's the thing. The scope of the waiver is that, see that those little rectangles just showed up while you touched them. So the scope of the waiver is really only use group 6B medical offices on the upper floor, right? So on the second floor, use group 4 is permitted as of right. So we needed to state very clearly on the drawings which place is the subject of the variance, and we asked for this over and over and over again and still haven't received it unless it's sitting on another layer somewhere on the PDF, and I don't know. We also asked that the building be better maintained with the railings and building addition freshly painted. Photos would have revealed whether this was done, but you can see from that one shot of that front yard that that the woodwork is in pretty bad shape. The railings and the ramp look very weathered. We also, this was way back when Commissioner Hinkson was here, she repeatedly asked, and by that time we'd had repeated hearings, repeatedly asked about the handicapped accessible toilet, which does not appear to be accessible, and she asked for dimensions and to prove the fixture placement rules are compliant. Instead, they just labeled it ADA. That does not make a toilet ADA. You need to actually meet turnaround requirements and so on. She also asked for Department of Buildings approved drawings, which we never received. So I think this time we bring the owner to the hearing.
You want the owner for 65 and 94?
Yes, and if there's an excuse like they didn't know in advance or whatever, then they'll come to the next hearing, and we'll only delay it by the distance of another hearing, because this has gone on for a year and a half. and with 3 adjournments, and one where they tried to adjourn, but we wouldn't let them. So basically, they're trying to just continue on their merry way without following our instructions. So, any other comments on that one?
Item number 5, 7595 BZ, 1635 3rd Avenue, Manhattan.
Okay, they requested an adjournment. Several of the PCEs are actually installing their fire alarms, and they haven't finished, so that's this one. Okay. You're looking to see whether you got anything.
I'm sorry, Todd re-emailed me on going back to 235 on 1 Mermaid Avenue. He said he showed me emailed it at 3:48 PM, so somehow it wasn't.
Okay,
We have
that's
a
what I
bunch.
thought, so he'll just resend and we'll try
It's
to look
photograph,
at it.
sign analysis, existing revised plans, statement of facts, landscaping photographs.
The joys and sometimes of opposites of technology.
Okay. All right, item number 6, 16898 BZ, 3050 Bailey Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay.
He made a corrective submission.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he corrected this is the one with the, I think the numbers on the plans, or is it the other one? This is the one with the numbers on the plans, I think, right?
This is the through lot one, this is just the
Yeah.
parking lot.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
Right, they submitted a signed and sealed survey.
but they had the survey in the last submission, so pretty,
Yeah.
not sure exactly what the correction was correcting.
Actually, my comment was with the next Bailey project.
Yeah.
Right, this
right.
one, what they realized is that the address or something was wrong on the plans, and when I called him about the other Bailey, he said, we noticed that on the bottom of the plans, there's a date, and he includes a letter, you should have that submission.
Yes.
Includes a letter, I guess, from the building department that says the address is actually this address and not the other.
right.
So there was some confusion, so he corrected the plan, he submitted corrected plans.
But we've had it as 3050.
Right, but if you look on the bottom of the plans, they were marked incorrectly.
Oh, okay. So they provided drawings showing fencing and shrubbery around the entire perimeter, which is very nice. Photos appear to indicate the fencing was installed, so now we need the landscaping installed, which you can't do when it's 40 degrees or 20 degrees. Landscaping also needs to be specified on the plans and spacing between them indicated. So these are to start at 4 feet high and form a dense screen to a minimum of 6 feet high within 2 years. So that's the goal, and then we need to know we know they're arborvitae, I think, but we don't know what the spacing is. So I'm not sure if we know. This one, the other one says arborvitae, this one just may say shrubs. The lumen spread diagram was also provided, which appears to indicate 2 locations of spread onto adjacent properties. So shields need to be placed on those lights to prevent this. And on this one and the other Bailey, we got these very interesting sort of gorgeous, colorful light spread diagrams, which I think have to do with light intensity, but it actually didn't explain what it is, is the red the hot spot and the green is the cool spot, and then why'd you need to do both? Why'd you do that plus lumens? Because it's basically the same. I mean, it's foot candles, it's the same. But anyway, they're really pretty. So, one drawing, A-301, was updated to remove the photos. That's what the update was. And I assume they did that because those are current conditions and not final conditions to be approved. So it's right to have separated the photographs from the landscaping plan. An updated survey was provided as well that indicates the fencing is within the property lines, which was a concern, and a firm map was provided showing the site's not in a flood zone. I think the site looks much better than when we started, and I really appreciate the owner's cooperation on this one, though we still do need to have the planting before we can close this out. Anybody else? Okay.
Item number 7, 16998 BZ, 3141 Bailey Avenue, the Bronx.
On the other hand, this is apparently the same owner. This site it has not been responsive to date and has been in hearings since September 2016 with 4 adjournments. A late submission was made on January 24th and another on January 26th. So really, we should be adjourning this, but I don't want to separate these two.
That's what I didn't,
Yeah.
as I explained to the
Right.
commissioners, I didn't want to, because this is more like a, kind of a compliance thing, like get them
Yes.
cleaned up and stuff, because we
Right,
figured if we
exactly.
adjourn it, then we'll never, you know.
Yeah, if we adjourn it, it's exactly what they want. So this is a case where
I
we
mean, he's
shouldn't be
trying to
adjourning.
get all that together, yeah.
Right. The submission shows photos of the tires removed and a new open metal picket fence installed along West 233rd Street. To comply with the proposed drawings, there still needs to be landscaping installed along that same section. The drawings need to indicate the spacing of the planting and indicate that they will be installed in ground in a 3-foot wide minimum planting bed, spaced to achieve a dense screen at 4 feet and reaching 6 feet within 2 years, 4 feet high, and reach 6 feet within 2 years. No photos were supplied of the fence along Bailey, which was supposed to be replaced with a new 6-foot high chain link and rolling gate, which was to be painted black with black slatting, the same way it's done on that other site, which looks pretty good, I thought. The applicant did provide the requested maneuverability diagram showing both curb cuts being used on Bailey. There was a point where they only had one curb cut. Drawing A201 is inaccurate in that it shows a chain link fence on the north elevation facing 233rd Street. That's the picket fence. We need also a full south elevation of the building and elevation also from across the street of the 233rd Street and Bailey frontages with the fencing in place so that we can understand what this is really looking like. The tarp was finally removed, but of course we can anticipate they're going to put it right back up because there's a car in the photo, several cars in the photo with their hoods up. So that implies to me that repair work is currently continuing to be done outside. I'm not sure how we regulate
I've been
this.
there. I just went back to the site to check, and the fences are in place. The amount of cars on this site, there are so many cars that it doesn't in any way, shape, and form resemble the site plan that you're looking at here. There's no space for any kind of drive aisle because there are cars all over this lot, parked in every which what direction. There are still hoists out there on the site, and there are several cars with hoods open. So it's clear that work is definitely being done outside. I know you're calling for that landscaping strip on West 233rd, but I don't have any confidence that anything will ever grow there because there are cars right on top of that spot as well. Wow. So they still are not in compliance.
So what do we do? How do we force them to be in compliance if they won't even do it while we're watching?
No, I'm sorry.
Maybe you vote no.
Yeah, maybe we
that's what
vote
you do.
no.
You say, no, this isn't going to work here.
Yeah, okay.
We didn't take a
Put them on
photo
a
of
very
it.
short leash.
What's the short leash? Even while they're under negotiation.
They're not complying.
Right, their lawyers
Keep
going
it
out
shorter
there
than that.
and photographing them. Yeah, I mean, at the very least, you pretend while you're in hearing. They're not even pretending. So, okay. So the owner definitely has to come to this tomorrow, and if he can't make it tomorrow, then we'll move this whole thing by 2 weeks, that's all. So not next week, but the following.
We have a couple of slots.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just looking to see if we had taken photos of that one site that Friday, I guess we didn't.
No, we drove by the site, but we
Right.
didn't,
We looked at the other one, and the other one had already been approved
yeah,
by Crescent.
but Commissioner
went
Holly
back
Brown is
again,
just
yeah.
there, she sees it all
Yeah,
the time. And then what else? The other part of it is there's a lot of things that still need repair, the asphalt and cement pavings crumbling. Yeah, okay.
Come on, are we done?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Item number 8, 214-00BZ, 2761 Plum 2nd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. They requested an adjournment to resolve a parking issue with the Department of Buildings. So they said that they were supposed to have met with the borough commissioner, building borough commissioner on January 24, so they should actually tell us what happened there, because it was supposed to be a discussion about this subject, and I don't know how that's going to affect this, so.
They did reach out to me, I mean, I think in trying to comply with putting the parking on that other lot, but I think then the DOB issued other objections that they have to try to address, and that's what they're working through.
But did you speak to them since January 24? Because they apparently were supposed to have a meeting with the commissioner
I may
last
not
week.
have, I don't know.
Because they didn't know the answer by the time they submitted this.
I'll ask them
So-
to just give an update.
Okay.
Dawn? Item number 9, 9707BZ, 80-16 Cooper Avenue, Queens.
They requested an adjournment also about fire alarms.
Item number 10, 18708BZ, 1247 38th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, I have lots of notes on this. Hold on a second. Okay. The project has been revised to eliminate the penetration of the required setback at the 5th floor, and the steel that was placed there without BSA approval or DOB permits is in the process of being removed according to photos submitted January 12th. The applicant should submit more recent photos after this review session or at the hearing, so we can see what the progress is, because they've had another almost 2 weeks to complete the work, ideally. Sections should be revised also to show the required setbacks and maximum building heights for the district, because that doesn't actually show what's being waived on the sections. And one of the sections is inaccurate and doesn't show the setback on 38th Street at all. The building's still a solid rectangle. Notes don't indicate that a sprinkler system will be installed throughout the building, although the programmatic needs statement states that that one will be there. Those notes need to be added to the plans, and they need to be sure that it's included in the project. A school without a sprinkler system is a terrifying concept. They need to show the gross areas of the subcellar, cellar, and mezzanine on the floor area chart, because we actually never know what they are. They only show zoning floor area. The applicant is applying for a ZRD1 from DOB for a determination that the cellar use is a catering establishment, which is a defined term, rather than a banquet hall, also defined. The applicant needs to submit to the BSA a copy of the proposed ZRD1 prior to its submission to DOB, as the clear distinction between catering and banquet hall was established in a 1969 directive, which is DOB directive, which is still active today and is referred to under, quote, applicable bulletins and directives in a 2015 DOB code notes publication on eating and drinking establishments. So it's not as if that 69 directive is ancient and no longer used, it's current. So I don't see why actually ZRD1 is necessary, since the directive is extremely clear about the distinction between the two uses. Catering establishments prepare food for delivery to banquet halls. Establishments advertising as catering establishments for weddings are Use Group 9 banquet halls, and dancing, entertainment, and music are permitted in such establishments, whereas they wouldn't be in a catering establishment. In addition, the occupancy classification indicated in the programmatic needs analysis shows the use as an A-2 assembly, which is specifically for banquet halls for food and drink consumption. So that's the building code designation, that specifically banquet halls, and an A2 isn't there for catering establishments. So the use designation should be changed on the plans to banquet halls, hence that's clearly what the parking requirements are. So I really don't understand the purpose of a ZRD1 other than in how you phrase the request. That's why we need to see it before it's submitted. The Programmatic Needs Report refers to an HPD letter approving use of the parking area on 37th Street for valet parking for the banquet hall. I'm curious whether a new letter was provided, because we have one from September 30th that is a general approval to use the area for valet parking for, quote, events after school hours. And we had asked whether HPD was aware that this was for banquet hall events, weddings essentially. The Programmatic Needs Report argues that, quote, the practice of renting our school buildings is consistent with the New York City Department of Education Chancellor Regulation D-180, which have a special office designated for renting out their New York City school spaces to the general public, a practice so common that they have special permit application forms available on their website. So I warn all applicants, when you cite to something, be sure that I will find it and actually read it. So it may be the case that they have such a website, but D-180 also specifically states, with respect to such extended uses of school buildings, that, quote, events which are personal in nature, e.g. weddings, showers, engagement parties, are strictly forbidden, unquote, and that, quote, school premises may not be used for commercial purposes, unquote. So the proposed use in this school building would not be permitted in a New York City public school building, so that little section there in the Programmatic Needs Report should be removed. So explain. I'd like to know how it will work with the buses versus the cars during banquet operations. Where will the buses go to allow parking for the in the 37th Street parking area? They can't go to the lot reserved for valet parking, and they can't go on the street, so where are they going to go? The applicant provided parking layouts for the other lots to show they can receive proposed automobile parking counts, but ultimately whether they can satisfy the parking requirements for the proposed use is DOB's call, since we are not waiving these. So that has to do with the maneuverability. So DOB has to agree that those off-site locations can handle the amount of parking that they say they can, and so they need to demonstrate that to DOP. And I also want to draw everyone's attention to the ownership requirements for off-site parking under section of the zoning resolution 44-34. Again, that's a DOB determination. If DOB is okay with their arrangements, that's a different thing. However, the parking leases that they provided are short-term. So that's part of that section. Actually, section 44-34 requires ownership, common ownership. The parking leases provided are short-term. One is 1 year and the other is for 9 years, and parking must be provided for the length of the use. So at the very least, the length of the use. But we're not waiving any of the zoning resolution requirements with respect to this, so that's for them to work out. We received a letter from Jay Goldstein, who's a representative for the Minna Street application, which we view as related to the subject application since the same school, whether or not it's the same set of principals, whatever. This letter explained that the increase in classes on the subject site for 13-year-olds to 7 classes with 210 students is typical of yeshivas preparing boys to enter high school. I think at a prior hearing, we learned that parents take their boys out of other schools and enroll them in this one for the year. What we learned but didn't know earlier, we learned here but didn't know earlier, is that the high school has not determined into what facility this increased enrollment at the 13-year-old level would move to, since Minna Street, even if the board approved it as proposed, would be inadequate to handle the numbers with only 3 of those 14-year-old classes. So that tells us a lot. It tells us a lot for the future with the Minna Street project. Also, we had some questions from the last hearing that were not addressed in this submission, either by plan revisions or an explanation. So just briefly, one, there's an ADA elevator that continues up from the men's banquet entry lobby from the 37th Street parking lot to the classroom floors, but the only way to get to it is through the side lobby, which is not the principal school lobby, hence is not along the same path of travel as is available to the other students, which is the whole idea of that ADA access. The ADA elevator off the 38, and it also, access to it from the main lobby requires passage through 2 sets of enclosed fire stairs. So it's, again, a person in a wheelchair always disadvantaged by having to go through a much more arduous process to get to an elevator than everybody else. The ADA elevator that's off the 38th Street entrance at least is more or less directly off of the main lobby, but you have to go through 2 sets of doors down a corridor where the doors are swinging out from an active staircase that will interfere with your access to the elevator. So that's really not worked out. And also, we asked, how does the school intend to prevent strangers working or attending an event at the banquet hall from entering the school level when one elevator and both stairs continue from the hall to the upper levels? They never address that, and it's easily accessed. So, other comments?
I think in addition to that, these are more like just cleanups of information. Some of the FARs that are listed, as I was comparing it to the previous plans, the FAR with the elimination of the 5th floor along 38th Street, that there should be a reduction in floor area. However, when I compare the previous submission and the current submission, the FAR still remains the same. So that needs to be
FAR and floor area remain?
both
Okay.
remain. It's showing as 114,954. I'm assuming there should be some reduction, and that needs to be indicated clearly. I think it must have been an omission, so it just needs to be corrected. I was looking at the maneuvering plan of the bus and the parking. I mean, the space along 37 being used as a bus drop-off and in the evening as a valet parking. And also from a neighborhood context point of view, how would that be seen, given that the rest of that stretch is being built out? I think there should be some kind of fencing that should be provided for that section where, like, between the 2 driveways. So that allows for enough vehicles during the evening to have to enter in without having to worry about these vehicles spilling into the sidewalk. That's the other concern I have.
Yeah.
So by maintaining that same curve of the bus turnaround, if you have a fence from one end to the other, I think you can contain some of the parking being on the side and the rest have been provided as per DOB approval.
So isn't that a central curb cut also for the nighttime parking?
It's not necessary. Well, it wasn't clear how that would work in the maneuverability. Did they provide a maneuverability plan? No, they did not. But from here, it was not clear how that was going to. It seems more of it was coming
Yeah, it
this way.
doesn't look like
There was
you
a
really need
maneuverability
that.
plan that was provided, and I'm not able to locate that.
So you could ask, what's the purpose
here
of
it is. Here.
of the central?
Here, right.
Yeah.
So, well, it does show, actually, I stand corrected. It does show a vehicle coming in, but it's also the access aisle.
It's more like a drop-off,
It's more like a drop-off, so.
so you wouldn't want a curb cut there.
Yeah. I think having these 2 curb cuts may be sufficient for the vehicles entering and figuring out a way.
Because what's unfortunate about using that as parking is you no longer have a drive-up for drop-offs, which would have reduced some of the buildup of traffic on the street, right?
Yeah.
So now all the drop-offs are going to be, well, they could be from, no, they'll be from that side, because that's where the lobbies are.
Right.
So that means there's going to be all these cars waiting who are maybe people being dropped off and using car services
Right.
and things like that. Yeah.
And I had a question, in one of the lease terms, the hours that are given is the
Yes.
valet parking is from 5 PM to 5 AM.
Yes.
So,
No, yeah, because obviously that owner is using the parking area during the day for his own business.
right, and it's only from, even though it's not necessarily the banquet party will be going on till 5 PM, 5 AM. That's really what my question
Oh,
is.
you were
leading
concerned
to.
about the 5 AM use.
Parking,
I think
yes.
it's more like, that's when his own use begins, so you can't be there past 5 AM.
And I had some questions about one of the sites that have been indicated for, as a potential parking area. This is lot 1, address is 1147 37th Street. It has 2 parking areas. It's the one that has L-shaped, and then there's one that goes straight through. If you look at the Google map, there is a ramp that's leading up right through the center, and I'm not sure how the parking plan as indicated, as provided, can be achieved, because the ramp is to the side, so these vehicular parking as indicated is not possible unless that ramp is coming down, and then they should provide an updated photograph. And this is the one that has a long-term lease.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the 9-year.
That's the 9-year one, yeah. And how are they, also we need to know the parking management plan, how is that being coordinated? I mean, you don't want unnecessary amount of vehicles circulating through the neighborhood trying to figure out if this parking spot is full. Is it one valet company that is going to take the vehicles and know when what is closed, and or there's a coordination? All of those things we need to understand, because this is, again, looking at the neighborhood.
I suspect it's not a valet company.
If it's self-parking, then
No, not, yeah, it might, no, it could be a valet, but I suspect it's not a company.
oh, I
I
see.
suspect it's more cottage industry. Yeah.
On the 5th floor now, there's that setback, there's doors onto that setback, so I'd like to know
Oh,
what
yeah.
that space is going to be used for.
Okay. Anything else on that?
No, I had some of the same questions that you both had.
Okay. Commissioner Shetta?
I'm good, no.
Okay.
Item number 11, 35-10BZ, 14411 77th Avenue, Queens.
Okay, this application is back on calendar after having been taken off calendar in July of 2015. We are no longer permitting applications to be taken off calendar, since doing so tends to function as tacit ignorance of the issues that bring the case to the board in the first place. In this case, the C of O has still not been obtained or ready to be obtained after 2.5 years off calendar. Last we discussed this, there was a vacate order and a stop work order, which according to BIS is still in place. I don't know whether it's been honored. I didn't see violations that indicate it's been violated. The cover letter states that it has been honored. They need to provide photos of the padlock condition. The submission is rather confusing, since buildings records indicates the fire alarm application was approved in July 2016, but no permit was pulled, and that sprinkler permits were issued in March of 2017, so I don't understand why the work wasn't done. The submission states something to the effect of them having trouble getting approvals for these things. Meanwhile, they have approvals and permits. Even if you need to amend as you do it, that's part of a construction process. You often amend the project, and DOB doesn't agree with the amendment, but that doesn't mean you don't have a valid permit to continue. So I wonder what happened with trying to obtain a partial lift of the stop work order to install safety elements, because they did actually receive permits, so you don't usually receive a permit where there's a stop work in place. So that's a little confusing to me. There continue to be 14 open ECB and 8 open DOB violations with over $100,000 owed in fines, according to BIS. The submission claims that $75,000 has been paid, but apparently those were for other fines. Receipts were provided, but some are not tied to a violation number, so you can't see if anything was paid off. In 2015, and it seems like they also negotiated on those other fines, so they were much larger and they negotiated lower, but when we last talked to them in 2015, they were going to negotiate lowering the fines, so what's going on? In 2015, we asked for a payment schedule on the fines and a plan to cure the illegal conditions. We still don't have that. The proposed plans and the 2011 DOB approved plans appear to match. So the deviation between the 2011 DOB approved plans and the BSA approved plans appear to be just some interior layout changes, addition of an elevator, modification to ramps and egress stairs, and a 3-foot 9-inch actual increase in the depth of the rear yard at the third floor. I don't know if that's a mistake. And the floor area went up slightly by 100 or so square feet, but still under the maximum allowable of 8,000 square feet. So it's not as if the change is being requested or anything that we wouldn't have normally approved, because they're all safety related. But you know, work has been going on illegally, and it's a very, very unsafe place. So I'd like to understand also, what is the fencing and landscaping proposed on the site to protect the adjoining property owners? This should be shown on the plans. And to discuss how we move this forward, because it can't just sit there as a padlocked building. Otherwise, we just have to call it a day on this project and say no more. But meanwhile, they spent all of this money. They should move forward.
A lot of the delay has been change in the administration, lack of funding, so it would be good to get an update on what the level of commitment the new administration has, and if they can also provide a timeline of the work to happen, and that should be provided to us in writing.
So we asked for this timeline 2 years ago. Right. So the time has changed on the timeline. So, you know, that's one of those things about embarking on a project when you don't have any money. You know, sometimes somebody else takes it over. In business, that's called bankruptcy. So, yeah. Anyway. All right.
Move on? Item number, anyone
Or
else?
foreclosure.
Well, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Hopefully the administration just changed and it's a new one, new vigor, and they want to do it. So we
Okay,
really
let's
want
see
them
if
to
they
give
deserve
them
that benefit. Okay. Okay, next.
Item number 12, 46-10BZ, 1401 Sheepshead Bay Road, Brooklyn. Received a submission on this? Withdrawal?
We received, no, yeah, they requested withdrawal of the application, but I needed to understand this. They say that the parking lot has been approved by DOB, and so they want to withdraw the application, but it's an extension of time to complete construction and therefore obtain a C of O. So, which expired on November 15th, 2015. So why are they withdrawing an application when they haven't completed whatever and certainly obtained the C of O? Don't they need an extension just simply to go to DOB and renew their permit and say, here's the off-site parking? I mean, I just don't understand anything about withdrawing this when you have an expiration 2 years ago.
I mean, unless they're really pushing it.
They're not.
They're not really pushing.
No,
No,
they're not.
it's an extension.
For the parking.
'cause
It
it's
was an
parking.
off-site, construction of an off-site parking lot to accommodate required parking, which was part of the grant, which required, the BSA grant required in the reduction of the parking application, off-site parking, which we've done on other sites, right? So they have to provide it.
Now
And
that
so they said DOB has now approved it.
Which is good.
That's a good thing, but the time to complete ended in November 2015, so they need an extension in order for DOB to consider their application and close it out and give them a C of O. I don't understand this withdrawal. I'm a little surprised by the applicant requesting the withdrawal.
Have it explained tomorrow.
Yeah, so it will explain, yeah, okay. Okay.
New cases, item number 13, 21796BZ, 16501 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, on this one, I didn't find any proof of service of initial application or of notice to hearing, and there's no comment from a community board, so maybe there's no hearing.
But there's no notification for extension.
Extension.
Term,
This is term.
Term, extension of term,
extension of term.
of an variance.
16501 Northern.
Yeah.
The wrong one.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, okay. I also didn't find, and I also saw the notice of hearing, which gives them, notice of hearing that we send out, which gives them instructions on who to notify, and all those are listed. So I didn't find also the previously approved BSA drawings in the folder, only the resolutions, so we need that. My main concern is the treatment of the rear lot line that is adjacent to a 3-story single-family home. Based on the photograph, or maybe that was Google, there appears to be a significant elevation change or a retaining wall surmounted by a fence between the two lots, and I just don't know whose property that's on and who maintains that wall and the fence, because the wall looks pretty bad, it needs a paint job. They should provide photos from inside the lot, walking around the perimeter, so that we can understand those conditions. Did you have other?
There are cars parked on the sidewalk.
Oh.
So it seems like they have quite a few more rental cars than their capacity in the lot.
How do we do this? Do we, to prevent cars from parking on the sidewalk, maybe we talk to DOT about allowing bollards to be placed on the sidewalk, something like that? Not bollards, not only property line bollards, but we're trying to get people to stop doing that, right? And we have problems in many locations. So if we have difficulties, what about sort of regular bollard placements along certain curbs?
Or alternatively, like I see this greening of this thing, extend that as much to the curb, so that prevents the remaining area that can be used for...
They park on the green. They sit there on top of the grass.
With the fence on it. With the
That, I mean,
fence
trees do the same thing, but the, so it's bollards or trees or benches, you know, street furniture.
Yeah.
That would be
Street
another thing,
furniture.
street furniture.
Yeah, some
So,
kind of street furniture.
Can you make a note about DOT? Whose case is this one?
It's Daryl.
It's Daryl. Is Daryl here? So it's a coordinated effort to contact DOT to talk to them about street furniture, bollards, things like that in front of problematic sites, so that we can, maybe we could set up a conference call. Okay.
I had some comments in addition to what you stated. From the, again, we need the plans because it's not clear what kind of landscaping was required per previous plan, and it's not even indicated in the proposed plan. Signage analysis needs to be provided, and I don't think the signage that is shown, it meets the C1 requirement, so that needs to be provided, and the plan does not indicate the location of the garbage bin. Those are my comments.
And they are lacking at least one street tree from the center.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
section.
Well, that would help.
It's to the north side of the curb cut, right?
Right.
So, but
West
that's,
side.
Yes, sorry.
that's them reaching out to the Department of Parks. And then it was also about signage, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So signage drawings and calculations.
Signage drawing calculation.
Right, okay. Okay.
Move on? Item number 14, 14301BZ, 348 East 9th Street, Manhattan. They failed to send out the notice of hearing.
Right.
They are postponed to March 6th. We sent out a new notice to them, so March 6th to have another hearing.
And that may happen with this other one, this previous one.
Do you want to give comments, or do you...
I didn't review it. They failed to give notice.
Okay, fine, okay.
It's not going to be heard. Why do we review something that won't be heard?
Okay.
I also will just flag, I'm just looking at this, the extension of time to obtain a certificate of occupancy, the last time expired 15 years ago.
Oh. Do we have, are there special rules?
Yeah, there's a rule about more than 4
8 years.
More than 8, yeah, it's more, anyway, we'll look at when this was filed.
Right.
And why it's just in the calendar.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, when it was filed, whether it can be considered an extension as opposed to a new variance.
If that is the case, it can.
Yeah, we'll
Right.
circle back with Mr. Minster.
Oh, okay.
Right, okay.
That seems weird.
Zoning calendar decision items, item number 15, 22414BZ, 22514A, 1534 Victory Boulevard, Staten Island.
Okay, this one required just some tiny little changes on the drawings about fencing, access, egress, parking area. They provided a parking management plan letter. I think the text of that letter should be a condition to approval, along with the requirement, which they didn't have, that the parking operations, along with the requirement that the parking operations manager will actively prevent double parking in front of the facility, because I remember that that was a really big problem expressed, and it's not indicated in that management plan, so we'll add that to conditions, and then there are a bunch of conditions which I'll go over tomorrow. We've talked about them before. Okay.
Item number 16, 33014BZ, 1746 East 21st Street, Brooklyn.
So this, nothing was submitted on this, and this was closed in June, and they keep deferring the decision, and they say they're deferring the decision because some kind of DOB determination needs to be made on another case or something like that, but we can't just continue deferring this. If we don't have some resolution on this, we can dismiss for failure to prosecute. I mean,
Okay, the applicants emailed me, so decision has been deferred at my request due to potential outstanding issue at DOB. I just spoke with the architect, and he asked me to defer decision again until February 27th.
I know. So, I mean, oh, so you got something confirming that they want to defer.
Well, yeah, because I
However-
confused it with the other case, sorry.
Yeah, no, but so the point is, it's not like we can indefinitely defer because you've got an issue on something else that we're not even aware of. If it's not working out, it's not working out, and we just deny, or whatever. I mean, I don't actually know what the issue is and whether it's so material to the design of the building that we can't go forward on it because we're ready to vote on this.
She'll send a letter. Do you want her to explain specifically?
Yeah.
Okay, so just let me read, okay. Send a specific letter indicated why time needed. Okay. Okay, continued hearing items. Item number 17, I'm sorry, can we move on?
Yeah.
Okay. Continued hearing items, item number 17, 116 14BZ, 188 East 93rd Street, Manhattan. Did you receive the submission I sent?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I have a comment about that, but okay. So noise analyst at AKRF did a noise and vibration study in the upstairs neighbor's apartment at 1I on November 28th, and then they followed up on December 6th, and found after that study that noise and vibration levels fell below the range of human perceptibility. During the tests, the tenant appeared to agree with that, and according to AKRF, hello? Okay. According to AKRF,
It's not on.
No, it's not on.
It's not on.
yes, it is. Oh, it's on.
Yeah, it's on.
According to AKRF, they were measured, let's see, noise and vibration levels were measured simultaneously in Unit 1I with broadband, quote, pink noise playing from the sound system at maximum operational levels, i.e. the maximum level at which an instructor could operate the system. The input device and mixer were set to maximum levels, and the trim/pre-gain was set to the maximum level of the sound that the sound system could support without clipping, which means setting the trim pre-gain any higher would result in audible distortion and potential damage to the sound system. AKRF provided input to adjust the limiter levels to mitigate noise transmission into Unit 1I. So, with respect to that, then we received a letter from the upstairs neighbor stating that the tests were done in his apartment on those dates, but that the music levels that passed the tests were not maintained subsequent to the testing. So I would like to hear from AKRF, so I'd like them to attend the hearing, what the acoustical, what their recommended levels are, and to find out what type of equipment can be installed to ensure that these levels are maintained, and to see whether there's a way to monitor compliance with those levels. So, because they said AKRF provided input to adjust the limiter levels to mitigate sound, noise transmission. Also, we had other open issues from the last hearing that were not addressed, which are provide drawing details of the acoustical measures taken. Oh, so, okay, that's midnight submission on Sunday. So, so we had questions about acoustical measures and proof of sprinkler installation. So with respect to sprinklers and alarms, we asked for affidavits from installers, and fire department apparently also asked for carbon monoxide detector at its last inspection. We received a submission on this yesterday, Sunday, dated 1/29/18, so that's, which we shouldn't be accepting because it's late, but is some of the materials that we requested at the last hearing. And I haven't actually had a chance to carefully review those because they were received late yesterday, but they do include the acoustical drawings and the fire alarm affidavit. And I want to make a statement in general with respect to submissions that come in piecemeal like this. Going forward, we will adjourn any case that hasn't fully submitted the materials requested at the prior hearing, including which submission must include a cover letter listing what is submitted. No more piecemeal submissions. It's ridiculous. And it makes it really impossible for us to understand what the scope of the case is. Plus, it's just not responsive and should be adjourned. In this case, though, it's more like a compliance hearing than a real hearing because there's so much trouble with the noise.
Well, oftentimes, PCEs will lock the limiter in a cage, and the only person who has the key is the manager or the owner, and perhaps they could pursue that as a solution to the varying noise levels that have been noted.
So the owner of the building is going to be here tomorrow. I think the sound guy and somebody. FKRF is going to be here. Yeah. Those three people will be here tomorrow.
You know, and with respect to locking it in cages, that's when your sound system is centrally controlled by one closet. What often happens where there's multiple studios, but I don't think this one is that case, right? What also often happens with multiple studios, there's separate sound systems in each studio, and the instructor controls with their iPhone what the music is. So I don't know exactly how with multiple studios that ends up working anymore, but in this case, there's just one studio, so. Okay, anything else?
I recall last hearing, we asked AKRF to put something that could permanently monitor the noise levels for a certain period of time. I don't know why they didn't do that. Some sort of a sensor to monitor like for a week or so and then see what is going on. So it sounds like they elected to monitor for a given time span rather than continuous monitoring.
Right. And one of the problems with these kinds of tests that we've seen is they're artificial in the sense that there's no class that's going on while they're doing this, right? So they'll turn the sound up, but the equipment or whatever it is that might also be, like with spin studios, the equipment that actually causes a vibration is the bicycles. And so if you don't do this while the teacher is aggressively trying to pump up the students and so on, it's not representative. And so that's why that kind of long-term monitoring makes much more sense, because then you're getting a full week of classes and of actual classes as opposed to these sort of staged events.
Yeah, I recall the apartment owner agreed that they could put some sort of sensor for a certain time and they could take readings for a week or so. I don't know why they didn't do it.
Okay.
Item number 18, 22614BZ, 14702 76 Road, Queens.
They requested adjournment.
Item number 19, 19615BZ, 250 Mercer Street, Manhattan.
Also requested adjournment related to the fire alarm.
Item number 20, 2016-4181BZ, 1981 East 14th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, well, what we were waiting for is plans to be modified to show 50% of the exterior walls maintained, which was done. Or close to. Oh, which one are we? 14th Street? 1981 East 14th, number 20, 2016-4181. Oh, you know what?
I think
This
we're
one
on
you might
19.
not have, what?
I thought we were
No,
reviewing
so,
19.
no, so what happened?
4181,
No, that 19 was adjourned. And this one, if you're looking, if your calendar wasn't updated, was put on last week onto this calendar. Because,
This was deferred from last week.
yeah, it was just deferred. Well, it
no,
was
I have it,
actually
I have it.
continued because we reopened it. We reopened this one.
Sorry, I apologize,
Yeah.
yes.
No, I haven't,
Reopened.
I just,
Oh, okay,
Reopened on the 9th and 23rd, right.
okay,
so you're okay with this?
yeah. Okay.
So you have the submission?
Yeah, I said, oh, you didn't hear what I said?
No.
I said plans were modified to show 50% of the exterior walls maintained.
Okay.
Okay. Next.
Good. Item number 2121 is 2016-4208BZ, 142 West 19th Street, Manhattan.
All right. The project has been modified to respond to our comments. It is now 7 stories and 70 feet to the roof with 10-foot floor-to-floor heights, which is just 2 foot 2 inches to 3 foot taller than the adjacent buildings to the top of their parapets, according to the materials that were provided. The initial application was 100 feet high and 10 stories. The building also has a 22-foot rear yard to compensate for the shallowness of the lot. The sections don't show and should the height of the parapet, And also, they show an incorrect maximum building height, which is based on the height, which should be based on the height of the adjacent building under the sliver law, not the maximum height in the district. This doesn't apply to them in this location, so that needs to be corrected. With respect to the height of the adjacent building, so I'm trying to look at what the actual scope of the waiver is for the sliver law. The C of O for Lot 62, which is adjacent at 140 West 19th Street, is 7 stories, and it says that it is 69 feet, which I believe is always when you go on the C of O measured to the roof, right? And this building is 70 feet. So, kind of close enough for who knows who gives that kind of information, right? And a recently filed alteration application for Lot 64 on the other side at 144 West 19th Street is 6 stories and 65 feet, probably to the roof. This latter, unfortunately, is 144, just had a fire on Christmas Day. And is actually subject of a vacate order. You can look at videos of the flames leaping out of the top floor. It's really terrible. I'd like to know on what the architects based their determination in this case for the heights of the adjacent buildings. Like, did they get a survey? Or, what are they doing with that? The total floor area is now 13,268 square feet as compared to the initial request, which was 16,052 square feet, so we brought the building down significantly. And as a result, opposition from the adjacent neighbor a little further down the street has been withdrawn based on the current proposal. Anybody else on that?
Yeah, regarding the cost, they submitted some updated cost analysis, and they still electing to go with the mat foundation, claiming that the difference between the mat and the split footings is just less than 5,000. I would like to understand why there's such a small difference between two totally different foundation systems. This might not be like significant for my opinion on this case, but I would like whatever submitted to the board to be intact and make sense. The other thing is the underpinning. They are saying that the underpinning for what they call it typical conditions, which is subsurface conditions with sandy material or so, is less expensive than the underpinning in case of the actual existing conditions. Again, I would like to see the design for the underpinning if it's available, and understand how come the conditions with subsurface consisting of sand or so will cost less than underpinning with rock formation underneath the building. Also, the rock leveling item still there. I am insisting that this item be taken out. We don't want to make it like a precedence for people submitting to the board. If we're doing rock excavation, it is rock excavation and that's it. There is nothing called rock leveling. I'm talking about the bottom of the excavation. If it is for something else, I would like to get an explanation on this. But if it's not, if it's for the bottom of the excavation, please take it out. Otherwise, if you want to convince me with this, I would like to get some sort of like payment requisition or so from one of the previous projects indicating that rock leveling is a real item, because I do geotechnical engineering inspections for probably 30 years now almost. I never heard of this rock leveling thing, so I would like this to be taken out.
Rock leveling, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, leveling the rock. Usually when we excavate rock, the bottom of the excavation is up and down by 3-4 inches. So what people do is just pour what they call it mud mat or rock sealer. It's a layer of concrete and it's 3 to 4 feet, 3 to 4 inch thick to make the bottom of the excavation is level. And the amazing thing is they already using this item in the cost estimate, and in addition to that, they are using rock leveling item at $35 per square foot, which is, I can't understand it. So I would like these items to be cleared out. That's it.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? No? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, we were also waiting for the revised CHASP.
Okay.
Final version of the EAS. This is the final version.
So we're waiting for the revised CHASP and the final EAS?
Just the EAS with all the sign-offs. We've been asking for that for all projects prior.
Okay.
You have a few cases to come.
Okay.
Everything ready to move? Mm-hmm. Okay. Item number 22, 2016-4216BZ, 1346 East 27th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, I still don't find in the folder, I don't know how we dealt with this, proof of initial submission to officials or proof of notice of hearing to neighbors and officials. I do find proof of service of possibly the most recent submission to officials on December 30th. If neighbors were never notified, we need to postpone this hearing and need to notify them,
I
so.
think I'll double check. I think I checked the hard copy. It's there.
Okay,
Yeah, but we did that.
okay.
Just scan it up.
Yeah, so that's pretty critical to be
All
able
right,
to
we'll
move
scan
on, right? They provided the approved 2014 DOB drawings showing the height measurement from the base plane at elevation 25.5, and also showing that zoning calculations assumed the building was existing non-complying as to floor area, lot coverage, and open space ratio. Those drawings consider the basement through third floor as zoning floor area and shows the FAR is .96, so nearly one FAR already. So in comparing the DOB approved set to the proposed, I see what was formerly designated as a basement and is now a cellar, although its extension at the same grade is designated a basement. So I find that confusing. It appears the architect is proposing to drop a ceiling in the basement to turn it into a cellar. I don't know if that or a dual designation for the same floor is acceptable to DOB, which it hasn't been in my experience where you get to call the same floor two different things. But I don't like doing this conversion as a workaround of the floor area regulations. If you want to do that at DOB, be my guest, but don't come to the BSA to do that. The cellar ceiling, by the way, can be removed the day after the C of O is issued, and then you have a 4-story building. So I'd say no to the conversion. You've got a .96 FAR building. If you want to add to it to get yourself up to 1 FAR, that's pretty standard for what we do here. So we need also to provide floor area calculations and demolition drawings and clearly indicate the areas of existing legal non-compliances on the drawings. I'm also confused about what we are supposed to be using as the existing conditions. Were any of the improvements approved by DOB in 2015 actually built? Permits were pulled and renewed in 2015, so we need to look at the as-built legal conditions as our start of what should be allowed as the existing building. That way we can, that's why I'm asking for demolition drawings, because that's the only clear way of actually understand what's going to be done here, and those are DOB required demo drawings, as opposed to these kind of strange sets of drawings that we get at the BSA, which we're going to shift away from now. We're going to move to requiring demolition drawings that use the same language that you use at DOB at the BSA, including zoning calculation charts. So Also, I'm not understanding why the proposed project measures height off of the front yard line level at elevation 26.8, if the base plane was the measurement point approved by DOB at 25.5. There needs to be consistency. But in a broader view, so just taking the outside view without all these complications about what's going on historically in this building, the request, assuming we can get past the FAR ask, is for a 20-foot rear yard at the rear and a complying 38-foot 6 rear yard at the second and third floors, and 9-foot 9-inch side yards and complying at 9-foot 9 and 4-foot side yards and complying 15-foot 2 front yard at the first and second floor and 25 feet at the third floor. So I think the main issue beyond floor area is height, which is another part that I'm a little bit confused about, is the height of the building, is the height of the building existing non-complying height? That's the other part I can't actually figure out with all these drawings sort of spinning around. And it's existing as opposed to whatever was before, if changes have been made to the building. So it's an as-built situation. So I really think the main problem with this application is there's too many things spinning around together, and we need to clear up what the existing as-built condition is.
Based on my site visit, I think what is built, the height of the building is, that is being proposed has been built.
Has been built, but we don't know if it's...
But it has been built, I think, with that whole issue of the mechanical space being on the third floor, which is now going to be replaced as residential units, so that gets counted as floor area. I agree with you, the difference of the lower floor, in some places being counted as cellar, some places being counted as basement. I would rather it all being counted as basement, and probably if we have issues with the amount of floor area to be consistent with the neighborhood, not allow the extension in the basement extension in the rear. You could have the first story extension, which can be below a crawl space or something like that. You don't need a full basement below that, and thereby at least the FAR is retained. The encroachment in the rear yard is not totally out of the context, because the abutting buildings have the rear yard encroachment. Existing building already has the height. It's just changing the use. That would be my recommendation.
So it eliminates totally the floor area at the basement level.
That extension in the back.
Yeah. Right.
That 18 by...
To make it really truly a crawl space, not 7'11", but
Right,
5
right.
feet.
And then you maintain the
Yeah.
ceiling, maintain the height of the basement as it stands today, and continue to use that without having to go through this fake ceilings
Okay.
being dropped.
Right, okay. That's a reasonable idea. Okay. So if you just make the basement a crawl space, do you think that's enough to compensate for what's going on the attic?
Well,
That plus the extension at the first floor? Maybe not. Anyway, you don't need to work it out.
yeah, I didn't work it out, but
Okay.
that was
Okay.
just,
That's a good idea.
that was one
Okay.
of the ways I was thinking.
Okay. Yep. Item number 23, 2016-4230BZ, 1912 and 1920 Amherst Street, the Bronx.
Okay, we received more letters from neighbors since the hearing. There were some letters sent right after the November hearing. So that's for a total of 23 in support and 5 opposed. I described the opposition's comments because people who are in favor never tell you why they're in favor, but opposition always tells you, and usually there's even a letter attached, in which case there were letters attached. Opposition issues were about parking, and one even sent photos. Several complained of double and triple parking, also concerning evening hours, and on a site visit, I observed double and triple parking in one location. With respect to the requested waiver for the setback penetration for the storage area, which they make sort of complicated on the drawings. I think it is simpler and more accurate to designate the entire area that's within the setback as an obstruction that we would waive, since there's also the corridor to the elevator, and also an elevator at that location has a stop at that floor, so that is not a bulkhead. And then I asked, since it's not a bulkhead and it does have a stop, and it actually must have a stop at that floor because the uses are different on that floor than on lower floors, then where's the bulkhead for the elevator? And if there is a bulkhead, unless maybe a hydraulic doesn't have a very high bulkhead, maybe you could get away with a bulkhead that's only just under the parapet height, or maybe increase the parapet height a little bit. Because what I'm concerned about is the interference with the minaret, because you want the minarets to reveal clean, right? And the elevator bulkhead is going to be right up against the minaret, and that won't look good. So I'm just curious what they're actually figuring out to do, because I don't think that's been thought out. So the drawings also need to show clearly the location of the waivers in plan, section, and elevation. They only did that in that one section for the setback level, but they need to show it on all of the elevations and plans. With respect to the planters at that setback roof on the third floor, my understanding from the last hearing was that no one was going to be allowed to access this level except for maintenance at outdoor area. As shown, it's an inviting setback level, and now with decorative planters at the edge, so that's, a perfect hangout spot. The applicant should discuss whether allowing access to the exterior roof setback levels of the building will pose an issue for neighboring properties given the location, as there are some residential uses adjacent and down the street. With respect to finished materials, which we asked them to show, the sides and rear of the building are shown as being unfinished concrete block. That's unacceptable. The building should become an asset to the neighborhood and the neighbors, not an eyesore. All visible sides should be treated with care and with attractive materials. It is posited that approximately 800 people will attend Friday prayers. That's where we got from the needs analysis. These will not be accommodated in the main space on the first floor because there's a maximum of 596 occupants at 10 square feet per person. So I'm trying to understand how the 800 will be distributed in the building. So is it correct to assume that the total is split between the 596 men on the first floor and the balance will be women on the second floor as indicated in the occupancy counts? Or is it possible that the men will spill onto the second floor and then the women's area reduced with movable partitions, which is done, right? The reason that I ask is because I'm concerned about the very minimal lobby area that is supposed to handle 800 people arriving at once. Classic mosques have deep porticos or courtyards to receive worshipers before they enter the prayer space. Often those are the places where you do the ablutions and you leave your shoes. So this is all being done in the lobby arrival area all at the same time. So I'm really concerned about that because of what we've seen on the street where the worshipers are actually crowded on the sidewalks. In this case, they'll be crowded on the sidewalks waiting to get in, and that's is a problem for the neighbors, right? So in some other mosques we see them split the worshipers on 2 floors, in one case on 4 floors actually. And so that would allow for perhaps a more realistic use of the other floors and a larger lobby area. And for me, in the interest of the street, I'd be willing to consider an imposition into the second floor rear yard so that they get more worship space and increase the size of the lobby. I'm also really concerned, given what we've been hearing about other large facilities like the banquet halls that have essentially the same amount of occupants, right? The buildings department is requiring these kinds of, what do they call, refuge areas on each floor where there's large quantities of people. And they don't have any refuge areas. They just have people spill right into the staircases on the other floors. So the architect needs to carefully consider the egress requirements, since I'm not convinced that the number of stairways and doors exiting to grade, assuming simultaneous occupancy, which I believe is what DOB will do, are adequate to handle these loads. Because there's really no reason why you couldn't assume the entire building occupied simultaneously. And I'm not even sure how that would be regulated, so DOB will just assume simultaneous occupancy. Also, we still don't have anything on the neighborhood impact with respect to the height and setback waiver, because this building is tall compared to its immediate neighbors, even though it's basically a permitted height in the district. The as-of rights and lesser variance plans were not modified to address comments from the last hearing, which I won't go over again because they should have that information. With respect to the parking, while I understand that the zoning resolution only looks at the largest space to determine required parking, total occupancy in the large spaces combined is over 1,600 persons, and I'm really concerned about that, especially what we learned from the parking study, because of what we learned from the parking study. So the parking study shows that on the study dates, on-street parking was at or almost at capacity during Friday noon to 2 p.m. prayer time. This allows for no margin of error in the study, other activities that need parking in the neighborhood, or increased participation by congregants. The present mosque is overcrowded and spills onto the sidewalk even on rainy days in winter, so surely must be discouraging congregants from attending who otherwise would. The parking study continues to assume a participation rate on Friday peak times of approximately 475 congregants, while the projection, as stated elsewhere in the materials, is 800 congregants. The parking study also considered maximizing the main prayer hall with almost 600 congregants, but that's still not 800. And the calculations all assume carpooling at a rate of 3 persons per vehicle trip, and I don't know how reliable that is, or it also doesn't allow for any margin of error. So I would also like to understand the parking issues that would arise for Friday evening prayers, where more people have returned home and are parking their cars, and or for early morning prayers where people have not yet left for work. The subject of shared parking stalls due to non-overlapping parking utilization uses was raised in the report, and the letters from opposition indicate that early morning and late evening parking is also a problem, so it can't be ignored in these studies, and you can't assume that non-overlapping parking stall situation. The triple parking issue also needs to be more carefully studied by the parking consultant, because I think the parking consultant was just looking at the curbside, but there's that area in sort of nearby where there's sort of, I don't know, it's like painted off, and there were cars all sort of stacked up there, and I don't know what that is, if that's some kind of formal or informal car gathering spot. And then we have open seeker issues for air quality, noise, urban design. We've reached out to DEP to understand why they believe the site would need a phase 2 and submitted an E-designation request, right?
Yes.
Okay. Others?
As I was looking at the plan, you had raised concern about the lobby. I think there are ways to make the lobby more. First of all, there are 2 vestibules from the street level and I think the prayer space would be divided between the first floor and the cellar. That area downstairs can also accommodate over 300, so a combination of that, and vestibule provides that access. I don't know why this elaborate staircase is being provided. Maybe that can be contained and provide more of.
The elaborate entry stair?
Yeah.
It's
So if
the
you-
one thing they have to say, we're like an important building and come and enter.
But then you also have these two vestibules, so there are ways of
Yeah.
consolidating it to make the entrance in a way more effective and remove the office space, and that way you do get a much more.
So the
Lobby
vestibule,
space.
we've seen this kind of thing where there may be an issue about everyone running down the stairs in a fire, hysterical, and ending up at the landing that is only 5 feet by through 4 feet, right? And then there's the door. So I think the reason they have vestibules is to deal with the sort of crush factor. And so I'm not sure that it's allowed anymore for you to just exit directly to the street from a fire
see.
stair where you have
Contain-
large, I don't know, because this area of refuge is sort of this newly presented concept to us in several different cases, and that may qualify as an area of refuge. So, not sure, but it's true, there's other things going on in the lobby, but you would expect like there to be a little office in the lobby where if somebody has an issue, they know who to go to, right? So it's not like the lobby has more functions in it than it should, it's that it's so tiny and handles 800 people all arriving at once. And so,
And you need to
it's-
go downstairs to.
or upstairs, or whichever thing.
Well, upstairs is the women's, downstairs is the men's restroom, so you need to go downstairs.
downstairs is- oh,
Downstairs
okay.
is the men, so men have to go downstairs
Okay.
and then come upstairs. So there's a constant circulation between up and down.
Right, and so
And that
then,
also congests
Yeah.
the staircases
Right.
more than the elevator. So the flow is also
I'm not
not very efficient.
right. I'm not so concerned about the elevator. it's
I'm
more-
not, but it's
yeah,
just,
yeah,
even if you take
lobby.
the stairs, everybody's going to go downstairs,
Right.
and then you have to come back up the same stairs and
Right.
congregate. So it does create.
Well, that's the other thing, that the shoe racks are away from where the ablutions are. I don't understand that, right?
Right.
Yes. So that, I also don't understand that. So it's like, you go to, yeah, it's out of sequence. And maybe changing the sequence and moving the shoe racks downstairs will open up the lobby, because the shoe racks are not lobbies.
But that would lead to a big commotion after services, to me.
Then you
You've got
have to go
people
down.
leaving, people going downstairs, getting shoes,
Yes.
coming back upstairs, and people going
Yeah.
down from
There's
the upper
just this-
floors onto the
Well, so then
lobby as well.
that, there's a
Yeah.
circulation, there's actually a
The lack of
design problem here,
efficiency,
not
yeah.
really understanding
Yeah.
somehow the sequence of going in and going out, right? And
And I-
normally, that's all going on in this amazing portico, which they don't have.
Right.
And I wonder if the shoe rack is being counted towards the room size,
I doubt it.
because it's within the main prayer area, so
But you don't sit there, so.
I don't know how that's been calculated. I
Yeah.
just would like that clarification, because that would reduce the number also.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Item number 24, 2016-4301BZ, 136 Oxford Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, so this site's in a flood zone, so we need ZRD1 and CCD1 along with a FEMA map on this, and this is particularly the case because we had issues with how the height is being measured and the use of the cellar. This was discussed a lot during hearings. The ZRD1 needs to make clear that height measurements meet both Article 6, Chapter 4, and Appendix G, so they should be, that should be a specific request in the ZRD1.
Just to clarify, the CCD1 should be for Appendix G, and
Oh,
CRD1
yeah,
should be for
yes.
Article 6, Chapter 4.
Yeah, okay. The ZRD1/CCD1
Yes.
should make clear about the height measurements meeting Article 6, Chapter 4, and Appendix G. Okay. The legend on drawing AP-101 still indicates removal and replacement of floor beams. So no existing material. Floor area diagrams show almost no existing floor area to be retained. Shading in the section plan doesn't coordinate to clearly describe what is being retained, removed, built new. Side elevation shows no walls at all at the first floor and above being retained. So, we have a threshold question, which we've had for a while on this. To understand this project properly, we're not going to use the standard BSA odd little drawing formulation. Instead, we're going to use actual demolition drawings in plan and section, the kind that you file with the Department of Buildings. And in order to qualify, so to repeat, in order to qualify for this special permit, 50% of the perimeter walls must be retained at the perimeter, and 50% of the floor joists must be retained. We discussed at the last hearing that the house is being lifted higher than is typical of the neighborhood. The neighborhood lift, hence, is approximately 10 feet taller than other lifted houses. The height is caused in part by a very high attic peak that is at least 5 feet, not to mention, but I'm guessing above the base roof line, over an 8-foot high attic ceiling. Meanwhile, the peak is above a boiler room and a space that's open to the bedroom below, and the down flight of the staircase, so actually isn't serving any practical purpose. They also need to give us a roof plan. And now, I understand the design of the building in this kind of pure upward, I think that's a gambrel roof, not sure, peak, but anyway, I get why that would be desirable from a design perspective to just have that sort of ski slope roof, but it's making the building extremely high. The rear yard incursion at the second floor was reduced by 4 feet, so now there's a 24-foot, 8-inch rear yard at that level, but no explanation has been given to justify the depth of that incursion. We asked for that information at the first hearing, along with heights of neighboring properties. At the November hearing, we were given an aerial photo and a rear yard figure ground that actually don't match up. So figure ground shows some data that doesn't look like the aerial photo. So this should be discussed further, and perhaps, I think we had recommended the last time, an actual field survey. So field data, in other words, go to the field and actually figure it out in the field, to be provided to clarify the depth, the depths of the adjoining rear yards and their building heights. That would make it a lot easier. You just stand on the roof of the subject property, take pictures. You can do height estimates that way. Seems more direct than always relying on Google. Anybody else?
Item number 25, 2017-190BZ, 23-11 31st Road, Queens.
Okay, we've received another letter from Councilmember Constantinides in support. We did receive a letter in opposition from Local 32BJ. They are not opposed to the concept of the project. They're opposed to the idea of expanding the Cornell Doctrine to include 100% affordable housing developed by not-for-profit housing developers. The applicant needs to address the points made in the letter as well as the cases cited. So among the questions are, how does the applicant propose that this and future boards hold firm on the expansion of the doctrine and not allow it to bleed into other forms of housing by for-profit or unscrupulous not-for-profit developers, or reduce the amount of affordable housing in the building and otherwise? How do they propose to prevent the leakage and the spilling and so on that the very articulate letter writer expressed or concerned about? The financial consultant's funding letter that was provided states that HPD and HDC have minimum income to expense ratio requirements and minimum economies of scale to obtain low-income housing tax credits and bond financing. I'd like them to provide agency documentation to that effect. The letter states that the minimum ratio is $1 to $1.05 without additional decimal points. According to that, not only does the 93-unit project meet the ratio, so does the 78, 83, and 88-unit buildings with ratios of 1 to 1.046, 0.048, and 0.049, since you would round up to 1.05. So that was strange. With respect to the minimum fundable building size, the HPD literature for the SARA loan states that a 50-unit minimum is preferred. That seems to indicate that a smaller building than what is proposed is considered viable, so I'd like them to discuss that. I also need more information to understand the financial analysis. How is each line item arrived at? How is it determined that an 88-unit project has a gap in financing, but a 93-unit doesn't? Why are there different allocations per unit size or percentage of project costs between, for example, the 88-unit and the 93-unit project? Where are construction cost estimates for varying project sizes? How are the other project sizes determined for this analysis, as we don't have floor plans? The gross floor area for the 93-unit project is larger than the proposed project area. So that seems to be shifting the numbers because you measure square footage costs by the gross. And what about financing and income for the DEFTA funded project, which we talked about the last time for the senior citizens area? They talked about, and they still talk about, that being funded by the Department of for the Aging. The financial analyst should attend the hearing to explain how the funding works. In response to comments from our hearing in September, the project was revised to eliminate the parking in the rear and the extension of the building into the rear yard. Consequently, the height of the building went down by 1 story and 10 feet and has been extended further to the east. There is still, for some reason, however, a 26-foot wide drive-through or something, parking space, not sure what it is, along the east property line, and it isn't clear why this is needed. Why can't the building extend fully to the eastern property line? And if access is needed to the rear by a vehicle, and why would access be needed to the rear by a vehicle? Then they should build over it, sort of, just have a drive under. It can't be needed for the quality housing corridor deduction, since only 1 window is required, and that window faces the street, and no window is provided on that facing that 26-foot drive-through anyway, so it can't be the reason. The as of right needs to be amended also to eliminate the parking and to make the first floor more equivalent to the proposed, using the number of residents that would be in that building to determine the size of the social and welfare facilities requirement and allowable deductions under the quality housing regulations. The cover letter states that the Independent Senior Center has been removed from the project and that all of the services provided on the first floor are, quote, social and welfare facilities primarily for residents, unquote, as required and described in the definition of, quote, affordable independent residence for seniors in section 1210 of the zoning resolution. This amounts to approximately 8% of the total floor area of the building, where a minimum of 4% is required. Under the ZR 1210 definition, the required social and welfare spaces are not permitted to include lobby areas, passageways, storage space, or other areas that are, quote, normally provided in residential buildings. So by definition, they must exclude the mailroom, the package and the bike storage rooms, and the property manager's office. The required social and welfare floor space is permitted to be located in the cellar. However, in this case, no cellar is permitted to be constructed or feasibly constructed, since the building is located in an AE flood zone and the FRCE level is at the first floor. It's for that same reason that all of the mechanical space must be located above grade. Furthermore, the project is in an R6B zoning district, so pursuant to district regulations is a quality housing building where recreational space at 3.3% of the total residential floor area is required to be provided under section 2821 of the zoning resolution, which floor space is excluded from the definition of floor area. The required recreation area can be included in the social and welfare floor space of the project. Doing that here, if it hasn't already been done, can be, okay, but you can exclude that from the definition of floor area. So if they haven't already excluded it from the definition of floor area, they should, to the extent that it's allowed to, 3.3%, and that would reduce the amount of the requested floor area increase. Hence, the applicant should provide floor area deduction plans and calculations for all floors, taking into account allowable deductions under the quality housing regulations. I'm confused, however, by the submission on senior centers that look to me to be standalone centers, not integrated into a senior housing project to primarily serve the residents as it must do here. Shouldn't instead the supporting information be about the applicant's other senior housing projects and the social and welfare facilities they typically provide in those projects? Similarly, shouldn't support be provided instead from the applicant's other senior housing projects to help the board understand why the assumption is that there will be 132 residents in the 75 one-bedroom and 17 studio units, and how it is determined that 50% of these will have caregivers to justify the need for a 200-person community space in the building. And with respect to the Department for the Aging funding, what is it that they would be financing? An accessory space for the residents as required by the zoning resolution, or an independent senior center? They need to provide additional materials for this because they're saying that they need the area to be of a certain size to get the DEFTA funding, but then they don't include that funding in the financial analysis, and so I'm confused. There seems to be a conflict there. With respect to the DIFTA standard...
Is the DIFTA funding more for operations? I don't know if it's for expenditure.
Well, it may be for operations, but what we learned on another case is that, so there's the construction financing, the takeout financing, and the debt financing, right? So if the DIFTA funding helps to alleviate the debt, then that's relevant, right? So, because the tenants themselves are paying very little, and there's Section 8 and so on, but what is handling the debt financing? And we did talk about at the prior hearing that construction of a large area that's not supported by any programs increases the cost of the project and then forces you to have more units. And if it's optional, then it shouldn't be there. So with respect also to the DIFTA standards, is the measurement for the size of the senior services based on the number of seniors using the facility or the number of persons, including caregivers in the facility? Because there's a per person square footage given, and I didn't know who the persons were. I actually didn't find any specific spatial requirements in the DIFTA standards of operations that were provided with this most recent submission, although I am aware that there was a chart provided previously, even though the chart doesn't have any assignation. It looks like anyone typed it up, so that should really be clearer. I would also like to understand why the large kitchen is needed, given that each apartment has its own kitchen, and that's by way of them explaining what the services are, or is it assumed that most residents actually won't cook their own meals, or like, how are we justifying that large kitchen? It's clear the kitchen is not available for outside uses like catering or banquet facilities. The rear yard is now shown as open space to be enjoyed by the residents. I'm happy to see that. And the building's also set back from the front by about 5 feet, so, which is actually a requirement of the quality housing regulations. So both need to have landscaping, and we need to see the landscaping. So they need a landscaping plan prepared by a landscape architect that shows the shrubbery and planting, and specs it and indicates the spacing and so on. And they should show benches, or I assume there's going to be benches and other kinds of things. Also, just in terms of planning, the elevator bank is very far away from the apartments at the eastern end. I think it should move down to be more central. HPD has standards for project compliance, and they specifically talk about the location of the elevator. And so I actually don't see that this would meet HPD design standards, so they need to explain how they propose to do that with that really long corridor far away from the elevator. And in this case, we also need a ZRD1, CCD1 about the flood zone, because the project is within the flood zone. And what was happening with seeker on this?
It's pretty much done.
Okay.
We're gonna request the designation
Oh.
once the decision date is
Okay,
finalized.
okay. So, but there's no other,
If you want the notes for the designation on the plans, that
Yeah.
is the only open.
okay, so maybe you could
And
give
air quality.
air quality,
No.
yeah, so yes,
We
so,
have the final EAS.
okay, we have the final EAS. So maybe you could give them, you'll give them the language for the air quality and e-designation notes. Okay. Anybody else on this?
I just want to go back to a couple of things you raised. I mean, one of the questions you had raised was how is DIFTA funding being incorporated into the financing? I think the one way to look at it is the building as proposed with the 92 residential unit, is that financially feasible regardless of the DIFTA funding? And just to go back to the 50, the HPD requirement, I mean, yes, the HPD term sheet does say 50 minimum, because they will not fund anything less than 50, because that is not viable. However, always we, at HPD, they always try to aim for a higher number of units, again, because of the economy of scale. So 50 is like the cutoff point for any discussions to be initiated, and that is also based on how much of other funding sources are being provided. That may fill the gap, but by and large, it's always pushing towards the outer limit to more than 50 units. So,
But so that's the question here. You said the outer limit. So what's the magic outer limit? That's what we're trying to.
I have worked on senior housing projects that have ranged for barely 52 units to 100 plus units.
So there's a range.
There's a range, and it depends on the site, depends on the issues surrounding the site, the need, of course. There is and it's combination, and the financial sources that have been brought about. One of the projects that I'd worked on that had nearly 100 units, it was going to be built with another. It was actually 2 buildings, but the funding was being cross-subsidizing the senior one.
Okay.
So there are many variables, there's no one that fits all, and I think it's very difficult to find one that would work for everyone.
Right.
But that's for them to answer, but by and large, we have always seen projects ranging on the upwards of 70s and 80s and that kind of thing. Very rarely do we see 50-unit projects.
Right. So I wasn't suggesting that 50 is the project, but it's more that 50 is a number that's given, and then there's and they're insisting that 93 units is it, right? But you know, why wouldn't, again, 83 units be it? And I don't feel like the materials that they gave said that it's, you know, sink or swim without the 93, and, or basically it's sink without the 93. And that the other part of it is we can't exclude the DFTA funding because the entire, or most of the ground floor has services that they said have to be provided under the DFTA program. And so, and they said that DFTA won't give them money unless they meet those criteria. So I'm confused about that. Let me just finish. I'm confused about that because they said the DFTA funded projects were all independent senior centers that they gave us a list of, right? So this is not an independent senior center. This is connected to the building. It's supposed to be social and welfare functions for the residents, right? So then, do they qualify for that funding for the residents? Because they're arguably making the building more expensive by providing that as opposed to putting units on the ground floor. That's what we talked about at the last hearing, right? So you can't ignore the income source for that, because if all of these different housing programs only fund per unit, then that's an extreme loss. What is it? What do you call it? It's inefficiency, because you've got so much floor area that's not receiving financing. So you really want to have more units to receive more financing, and you're creating fewer units, and therefore, and having more costs.
I'm wondering if the question should be posed to HPD as to when they are doing the financial analysis, are they factoring in the DFTA funding for their financial viability determination? And the drop-off that they have proposed, I thought that was more for like delivery and pickups and things like that, and maybe when they have people coming via access a ride instead of having to park on the street, or whenever they have group events, a van picks up and drops off there. That's kind of what I assumed, but it's not very clear in the text. That's what was stated in the earlier presentation as to why they need to have that. So I'm assuming that's the reason they have just retained that little bit of the portico for that kind of
It's not a portico, they're just cutting the building short by 26 feet. So I suspect what's really going on there is it's another way to access the senior services, but even if it were, why isn't the building continuing all the way along the street line? It's actually strange neighborhood character-wise, because it's an interruption in the street wall for no apparent reason.
No, I agree
right?
with them. You can add that, extend that out.
Yeah.
But
And, the effect of doing that, for one, I also don't understand, if the effect of doing that is to reduce the height of the building, it's cheaper to build it.
my only thing is it may be because they're trying to retain the length of the corridor. If it goes any longer, then you have to put another firewall or something like that. So,
That's done with fire doors. But the big problem is,
right.
the elevator is too far away right now from the guy who lives at the very end. And there's a way to plan it. There's no reason why they shouldn't put the lobby in the middle.
It just takes away one unit then because this is not a desirable place for a unit. There is no window. So that's one of the reasons why the stair and the elevator and the...
But they'll get more units, and anyway, it's not our job to design it, but the other part of it is they're
If they
not
extend it out.
developing the entire site, and that makes the building higher. So that's forcing a waiver that's not necessary. So, 26 feet, that's that's 2 apartments. Or 1 bedroom.
Again, I think this is all the magic of the financing that they have to figure out how much that
Yeah.
addition of that and extension, reducing the height, does that add to the cost or take away from the cost?
It's always cheaper to build horizontal than it is vertical. Reduces the cost of the structure.
Right,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
dispute that, I just think even by adding those few floors doesn't take away the need for this additional floor. You would still need to maintain some amount of the floor
Right,
above.
that's true.
So,
Okay. Any other comment?
Yeah, regarding the cost estimate, the cost they submitted is based on per square foot price, just one lump sum price for the entire building, 375 per square feet. I believe in the coming submissions, we would need to get some feedback, some detailing for that number. Possibly they can take one of the options, the 93 proposed, and they can do a detailed cost estimate based on real plans and construction items. And from this, they can estimate a more refined number for the per square footage, and they can use it for the other options.
can I ask a
Right.
question? Why is that being asked? Because isn't that not one of the findings?
No,
I
so-
thought there were.
So the thing is, we're being asked to look at we need to know, what's the minimum variance? They're saying it's 93 units. They're saying it's 93 units because the funding, assuming a construction cost of this and these funding sources. And they're saying an 83-unit building, for example, or whatever the choices were, 88-unit building, so only a few units, 5 units different, is not viable because of the construction costs and the funding sources has this huge gap, right? So if they're claiming that the only way that they can justify the size of the building is based on funding, and that without hitting that critical number, funding doesn't work, therefore they must have the 93 units, then they have to support better the costs, or they have to give us some kind of standard. How does the pro forma work when you submit to your funding sources? You know, do the funding sources use $375 a square foot and that's it? Or do they expect you, my recollection is they expect you to give a cost estimate, even though it's not done, you know, with a fine pencil yet because you're still in schematics, but you're still expected to go to the funder and show, here's my project, it's going to cost this many millions, and I need funding, and I have commitments from these and these and these, and I need you for this gap and that gap.
True, but that level of detail that Commissioner Shetta is asking for is a level of detail we've never asked for on a not-for-profit in terms of justifying the construction cost per square foot with drawings and each line item. We've usually accepted construction cost per unit.
Okay,
We
so-
have a loose estimate, not an exact estimate that gives us like 50 line items, including like
Right.
fixtures, you know, partitions, and we've never asked for that before.
It doesn't
so
need to be
it's-
that detailed. I'm not asking for this kind of like very detailed.
So far,
Yeah.
all they're doing is $375 a square foot.
Yep.
But previously, what they would do is like $369,000 a unit, you know, and we've never sat there and gone, well, what exactly do you mean by $369,000 per unit, you know?
Right. Well, but with that, agencies often provide this is how much the unit it can't cost more than this to build this unit. So you guys need to back your way into this number to make this project happen, right?
Right, yes.
So maybe that's another way of doing it, if whichever, HPD or HUD or whoever says, this is the unit cost as opposed to what we're funding. This is the allowable unit costs, then, as opposed to what we're funding, because you're going to be funded from lots of different sources, that's one thing. But then we also have the ground floor, which is not fitting within those units. There must be, when they do per unit cost, there must be some percentage allocation for like general
Yes.
space, right? But an entire, which would include the mechanical somehow, right?
Right.
And it'll include some basic lobby areas, but it's not going to include an entire floor of stuff where there are no units. So how does that fit into it? So we need to understand better if it's a per unit cost that they're that they're underwriting essentially, then how much of the kind of general gross area stuff is included in that, corridors, laundry room, and how much isn't, in which case, what are those costs, and how will that cost, where does that fit into the underwriting? You know?
I mean, I do get your point, absolutely. I just note, and I caution us, that we have never asked for that level of detail. We have accepted their range of acceptable per unit costs. We have never said, now break out what part of that cost is the actual apartment and what part is the first floor lobby, the security office, maybe, the social services offices. We've never asked for that degree. Usually, there's a letter that basically, from an agency that says, we generally fund projects in the neighborhood of $325,000 to $375,000 a unit. That's what we do. But there is never any detail as to, and that should be broken down as $275,000 for the actual unit and, another $50,000 as that unit share of the common area. We never see that.
So, but we don't have an agency letter. All we have is an independent financial consultant's, whatever, description of the proposed financing structures, right? So if we had an agency letter, and we've been asking for this for a long time, I would feel easier about the application in terms of all this. But we don't have anything from an agency side to explain, for instance, if the agency said, if it's not a 93-unit building, we can't fund this. Right? That would be it. And the agency would say, we looked at it, and the only way that they can possibly make this happen is if it's 93 units, then we know that it's the minimum variance necessary. But at the moment, it's a lot of talk by one financial consultant, right? So I agree with you, if we had an agency letter that said, we allocate $375,000 or whatever the number is per unit, or one bedrooms are this and zeros are that, and then in terms of common area, beyond a certain percentage of the overall. For instance, you assume things like 5% for mechanicals or 15% for common area, right? But we're much higher here. So what would they do with that? And like my experience when I was working at DHCR was, for instance, commercial areas were unfunded. So that meant the not-for-profit had to actually take out a bank loan and decide it wanted to take the risk that they would be able to rent the commercial area, even in neighborhoods where nobody was renting the commercial area at the time. So, but that was, and so oftentimes the not-for-profit said, I'm not taking the risk, I need that to be an apartment, and then they would turn like the ground floor unit into an apartment, right? So it's that. I feel like we're being asked to tie strings together where we aren't given enough thread, or, where there isn't enough information provided by known reliable sources. I think that's why I keep asking, and maybe why
And
Commissioner
I
Shea
believe
keeps
if we
asking.
have per unit prices or per unit cost estimate, based on the proportion of the floor areas included in the units to the floor areas included in the lobbies and other areas, the per square footage price would vary from one option to another, from the 73 to the 93. That's what I'm talking about. Right now, they are using 375 for all of them, which doesn't make sense. So if they want to like go another route and just vary this from an option to another and send us some rationale for this variation, I would be okay with that.
Well, I could see where they would say $375 a square foot blanket across every single scenario, which would result in a higher per unit cost on the smaller developments than the larger developments.
That's less economy of scale, that's what they're
Right.
arguing.
Yeah. So I could see that. And that was my underlying assumption.
Right.
But I understand your request for question for more information, but I just think that it's almost a situation where they've provided so much more detail, that more detail nets more questions.
Right. That's
As opposed to having just gone into it with a basic overall, we have this letter from HPD or these funders who basically say we look to fund projects that are in the neighborhood of this amount of money per unit to this amount of money per unit. 93 units falls within this, 88 falls without this, 77 outside of this, therefore, boom, we don't look at that as attractive, and we're not as likely to fund it because it's competitive
That would be
funding.
amazing.
Right, and it's a general letter.
Yeah.
It's a letter from an agency that's actually coordinating the funding, and you don't need all that other detail.
But then we're relying on the agency. Now we're not relying on the agency, we're relying on their own consultants, which we've learned sometimes you can rely on a consultant,
Right.
sometimes you can't, right? So that's part of it. The other thing that I think distinguishes this type of an application, independent of the A finding, but this type of an application is that when it's a not-for-profit like a school or a house of worship or whatever, the costs are irrelevant to us because there it's based totally on a programmatic need, whereas here it's not programmatic need exactly. Here the claim is we need this many units because we don't get funded.
Right, but I understand exactly
Yeah.
where you're coming from because this is more of an affordable housing model.
Right.
And what I'm talking about is what we usually request of affordable housing developments.
Yes.
Is that they give us the per unit cost and expenses and why an economy of scale is necessary and why this narrow range is what's acceptable in terms of feasibility.
Right, okay. And I think that's part of the slowdown here. If we'd gotten an
Right.
HPD letter, that's a whole other subject. I
Exactly.
totally agree with you, yeah. All right, so, hint, get an HPD letter.
We have an HPD letter.
What?
We now have an HPD letter.
Oh, we do? What does it say?
But doesn't talk about the cost per unit.
So we'll
So
need to
should-
refine.
It's a letter of support. I just checked my email
So
now.
just generally, go forth and prosper letters aren't really that, they're supposed to be informational. So we can talk
It
about
is
this.
somewhat informational,
Okay.
but maybe we can request them to revise it
Yeah.
based on this request for verifying the cost per unit
Mm-hmm.
of what would be a viable project, like you said. So,
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay.
What? Item number 26, 2017-225BZ, 306 East 61st Street, Manhattan. We still need a FEMA map?
Yes. So with respect to the DOI issue that we had raised at the last one, just to let them know, the applicant submitted massage licenses for that location on Franklin Street as well as Department of Health permit, and we independently reached out to the Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement, and there are no records of investigations of the Franklin Street Spa. So that's that. We have a firm map, and it's not in the flood zone. We received
FEMA
the
map.
flood.
You did get a map?
Yeah, FEMA, so it's the Federal
Enforcement,
flood
flood, no. FEMA is Federal Environmental Management
Federal
Agency.
emergency.
Sorry?
Federal emergency.
Emergency Management Agency, and FIRM is the Flood Insurance
Rate map.
Rate Map. Thank you. So we talk about getting firm maps from FEMA.
Preliminary.
So that, preliminary, so just to keep all your
Acronym straight.
correct.
I'm sorry, firm map, he needs
A
a firm.
firm map from
have
FEMA
it
we
already?
received, and it's not in the flood zone.
Oh, okay, because that's what, I just got, Rory's little notes and,
Yeah.
okay, fine. Sorry, I
Okay.
read that wrong.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll just question the board, we are at, what time? 12:19, we have to go until 12:30. All right, new cases, item number 1, 2016-4217BZ, 1665 Bartow Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial filing to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. This is evident by the number of letters. Community Board 12 voted to oppose the proposed car wash use, but to support the continuation of the gas station use. We have close to 100 letters of opposition and 3 letters in support. Several of the opposition letters describe the frequent accidents at the intersection and the conflict with existing bus stops, along with extreme traffic conditions. The applicant needs to provide crash reports, perform a traffic study, and discuss the conflict issues related to this proposed car wash, if they're serious about wanting to actually have a car wash at this location. Work started on this car wash, I guess, without permits, and there is a stop work order in place that was violated. So let's just say they don't have a good track record starting right now. To consider the requested waiver of the BSA rules under 1-07.3B3. The applicant must demonstrate that the use has been continuous since the expiration of the term in 2008, and substantial prejudice would result without a waiver. Both requirements were addressed in the submission, but I don't see how the DEC record on the tanks that were last tested in 2004 establishes continuous use between 2005 and 2011, after which point we have receipts. So I'd recommend they do something like a reverse telephone directory listing, Con Ed bills, things like that. I understand maybe the seller didn't hand them, here's my folder of my whole life. That often, unfortunately, doesn't occur. The substantial prejudice discussion in the statement of facts is incorrect. It isn't that the failure to reinstate would prevent the issuance of the C of O, and maybe violations would be issued and things like that, but will continue to operate. The use would become illegal, and DOB would have the authority to require its termination, its shutdown. There are 14 open ECB and 2 open DOB violations on the site, including the 2015 stop work order for work without a permit and a 2016 violation for violating the stop work, and $26,000 in fines for outstanding violations issued just in 2015 and 2016. So they're not even dating back. Many of them were written off that were before that. So we don't move forward on any approvals at all until all fines are paid. And no adjournments on cases like this, where essentially it's a compliance hearing as well. I also don't see how the owner's representatives can say in the statement of facts that the site is in compliance with the 1961 or any other grant with this many open violations and fines, and when the compliance certification itself acknowledges deviation from the prior approvals. Always check your statements. I note that this application received a dismissal warning letter in September, so the applicant has been sitting on the application already for more than a year. There's a central pump that's diesel, and I didn't see that any of the prior approvals permitted diesel, so I'd like more information on that, especially given the site. I note that the last time the tanks were tested for leakage was in 2004. according to my research, and it's not like I'm an expert on the subject of tank testing or leakage, a new New York State law in 2016, October 2016, a new New York State law in 2016 requires testing by October 2016. So they should provide proof of required testing or an explanation from a competent source, that is somebody who is an expert on such things, on why this would not have been required. The site itself is in pretty bad shape, in particular since the illegal construction spills onto the site and results in stack-ups of concrete blocks and blocked-up display windows. The photos provided show the day on which 2 cars for sale are placed on the sidewalk, and you can also do that on Google. The 1998 approved plans were very clear in their intent to buffer this use from the adjoining residential property to the north, with a 5-foot wide planting strip on the property line and facing Tiemann Avenue. This strip was never installed, and it's for that reason that we now require all the work to be done prior to our voting, rather than to make such work a condition of approval, because it never gets done to large extent. Furthermore, the little storage addition was very intentionally limited in height so as not to obstruct the second floor windows of the adjacent residents. The prior board was clearly concerned about the impact of this use on the neighbors. The so-called existing conditions drawings don't resemble the actual existing conditions very much. Most of the windows shown on the drawings are now blocked up, and the openings at the storage extension are completely different. The proposal now is to remove that little structure and have that become the awkward hard left turn into a new car wash, and a hard left turn which they can't even show to doable on the maneuverability diagram. It's sort of like the car rotates on a little, needs to have a little turntable, otherwise it's not going to make that turn. And it will enter into the car wash directly adjacent to the residential property on the Tiemann frontage, run inside the existing building and out to Gun Hill Road, eliminating the auto repair business while retaining a small retail area. It also retains the gas pumps. The so-called 10-car queuing area will completely fill the lot, and somehow also the cars obtaining gas, not to mention the trucks obtaining diesel, will all fit together on this tightly packed site, having for the most part access the site from the one easternmost curb cut on Bartow. So, this is clearly a case of asking one site to do too many things and also ignoring the impact of this use on existing traffic patterns and on the residential uses adjacent to and across the street from the site. Car washes are notorious for creating traffic buildup with long lines spilling into intersections. The applicant would need to demonstrate, in order to persuade anyone here, that it could accommodate all of the proposed uses on the site and not exacerbate existing traffic conditions. I personally don't believe it'll be able to do that. And Commissioner Otley Brown shakes her head, also doesn't think so. I don't know, therefore, what the owner would prefer to do instead here, but the site needs to be brought into compliance with the 1998 approval at the very least and done immediately. Other comments?
I agree with you on all the comments. I also think, given the site is it's on an incline, any such car wash, anything that's going to happen, not just the traffic, but the amount of pollutant water runoff that's going to happen, it is not even been discussed. And oftentimes we know it, and I would say I'm probably guilty to it also. When I get my car washed, after the car gets washed, you go out, the car gets out of that cleaning machine thing, and there is that wipe down that's happening. And most of the time that ends up happening almost on the sidewalk. So this is adding a lot of layers of conflict that are not even measured in any of these analyses. And given the existing condition, I just do not know how this can anyway alleviate, but the issue, I think it will only exacerbate the issue more. So I'm not at all convinced with the information provided to date.
So I take issue with the intensity of the various uses on the proposed site. I think that, like you both do, there's simply, this site is being asked to do too much. I think that you've got potential conflicts between your diesel and your large car, small truck maneuverability around the site, coupled with the conflicts from the reservoir spaces. This is not a traditional reservoir line that we see. That's a single file line that snakes its way around. This is a double file line coupled with a perpendicular extension of a line that actually would join the existing double file line halfway in the middle. So aside
That's
from
adding to
literally
the
having a policeman or policewoman there with a gun, I see that there's literally going to be loads of conflict, because as spaces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 move in, more people are going to come off the street and jump right in behind those spots, not knowing that there's 8, 9, and 10 perpendicular in the middle of the parking lot.
Causing more backup onto the street.
Yeah, so there's a conflict right there. It's like, I don't know how you would get spots 8, 9, and 10 to get into the line without having new people come in off the street. And I say this because, you know, car washes, especially when there aren't that many car washes in the area, there's always a lot of people flocking to these car washes, especially on weekends. And there aren't many car washes in this area, so I could see that this is going to be heavily used, because I happen to use the one that's not that far from here. It's a couple of miles away in Mount Vernon, and that one gets loads of people where the 10 reservoir spaces are not enough. It actually goes right out onto the road and almost backs up into the highway exit ramp. So, yeah, so car washes get a lot of traffic, especially at certain times of the winter, after a storm, and so on. And so this is not going to work. There's no way that this is going to work. I don't know that I can be convinced at all.
I really recommend that the applicant just stick with the existing use and not waste its money.
And improve the existing.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
But what I mean is, we'll be asking for a lot of studies, and in the end, I don't believe that studies will ever be able to show that this is a viable use here, and those studies cost a lot of money, so.
I just wanted to just really quickly, like, if this is something that's pursued, there's a 1973, I think, Buildings Department memo that explains the requirements for the queuing.
19 what?
I think it's a 1973, I want to say it's a DOB memorandum that gives instruction to DOB on how they calculate for as-of-right car washes, the queuing. I don't know if that would be something
Yeah.
that maybe should be part of the record.
Yes.
And also just typically a discussion on accessory use, because, you know, the board has historically kind of dissuaded car washes, or I don't know, it's always been accepted as an accessory use under 1210. There's actually a definition for accessory uses to automotive service stations. I've seen one in my time, but I think that was like a mechanical type of car wash.
Yeah, I think they're just the things that are next to the air.
Yeah.
Where you put in your quarter and you do it yourself,
I've
right?
seen one in Staten Island,
Yeah.
but the lot was probably 2 to 3 times this size.
38,000 square feet.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
huge, and there was plenty of room for queuing for that car wash, and still, it took a long time for them to get to an approval with this board because of the intensity of use. It was gas sales, I believe it was convenience store, and then they also wanted a car wash, and their ultimate argument was that they had so much land they needed to get income from it, because it was just land that
This
was
was like a coin-operated, unpersoned type of car wash.
That one on the,
It
Staten
was
Island?
right off of Forest Avenue
Yeah.
in Staten Island.
So there's like
Still
an individual you
cleaner.
feed and you clean individually.
Yeah.
This is,
So that's
that was,
arguably
like I said, as
slower.
part of that record, they were, because typically in the reviews, we would ask typically to just explain how this is incidental or customarily found, even though you see these sometimes in C or M districts, but both uses would be permitted as a right. So I just...
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Right, and it was a very high threshold for them to...
And that was the same exercise that was done on that case.
Right, exactly, for them to prove those findings. It's really high. And I also want to mention, we had a car wash without the requisite reservoir spaces in Brooklyn, and that was not granted.
It was not
Precisely
granted.
because of the lack of reservoir spaces and the queuing that was going to go up a major thoroughfare.
And that was a common law that's...
There was a variance, remember? The variance
Coney
on,
Island Avenue?
Coney Island.
yeah, no, variance on, no, it was a variance because it was a whole set of financials on the viability
Okay,
of it.
between all of these memories, we will
Sorry.
pull that case because everyone remembers the same one, and the number will come up shortly, probably in Tony's head.
Item number...
Oh, wait, Commissioner Sheta, did you have?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Go,
I mean,
this one?
you're good with this one, or you don't have any additional?
No, I don't have any additional, the main comment I had is about the maneuverability plan, but other than that, I'm okay.
Item number 2, 2017-39BZ, 271 Church Street, Manhattan. It's a PCE.
Yeah, so, I didn't find proof of service of initial application to officials or of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors in the folder, but we do have Community Board 1 support and 1 letter in support, so those must have gone out, but we need them.
I'll check the file.
Right, but because this is a legalization in a residential building with cardio classes, the building's residents should be notified to attend the next hearing or to provide written testimony. We could put it on for an early next hearing, but really they need to post in the lobby and give people an opportunity to write in their testimony. They did submit approved fire alarm drawings, but we need either a sign-off by fire department on the installation and inspection, or an affidavit, if that's not possible, an affidavit from the installer. Photos were provided showing alarms and sprinklers installed. We also need sprinkler sign-off, etc. The BSA notes on the drawings don't indicate that a sprinkler system has been installed, although it refers to a sprinkler application number, which just makes it sound like they applied. That doesn't mean they installed. So they need to have installed, especially in this case, it's all going on in like subcellars and so ADA access is through a freight elevator through the side. I don't know if that would be okay with DOB. You enter the side and
It's
then...
not even attractive, it really looks like a freight loading area.
It's a classic freight entrance. And I don't understand, why can't they go through the residential lobby? Because residents don't want outsiders, right? So, yeah, to relegate a disabled person into where the garbage travels up and down is really not okay. Also, there's a bracket sign and a flagpole sign. This is a building in a historic district, so we need LPC sign-off for the signs. The floor plans also should include a site plan that indicates where the streets are and where the entrances and egresses are relative to the streets. I was actually surprised to find a set of drawings without a site plan that shows you the name of the streets on which the first floor is located. Also, now that we're talking about it, is the sound system on a limiter. And then there's this Studio B, which looks like it's in almost like a vault. I don't know whether that's in the subcellar, I think. So I don't know whether they just moved into an existing like boiler room or something like that, or whether this is actually something really extreme that goes on in there where they had to create like 3-foot thick walls. So one or the other. Also, the drawings describe something called a new mezzanine. which is indicated in the section Z06. If it's new, wouldn't it be creating floor area in an overbuilt building? So they need to explain that because they say there's no change in floor area, which is not a correct statement. Maybe they're trading off from someplace else, but, and I just want to note to, it's both an in-house note and an instruction to the applicant. The drawing set that was submitted in August is not complete. There was a complete set submitted in February and then a partial submitted in August. And so we don't actually know what the total submission looks like. So they need to resubmit a complete package, signed and sealed. Okay?
I have just a couple of comments. I want to confirm that they have 3 studios. It wasn't clear from the drawings again. Maybe it's the various drawings looking at the correct set. And I think the plan shows there's only 1 locker room for women. And I don't know if...
No, there's actually, because I actually go to a studio that's like this. There's a men's locker area, which is just a tiny area with lockers and a bench, and a women's locker area, which is just lockers and a bench. And the toilets and the showers are
those are
shared.
shared. Okay.
Yeah.
It
The
wasn't-
ultimate in unisex.
Okay. And the other question was the mezzanine level addition to the FAR floor area. What is the use that is being assigned to it? It wasn't clear from the drawings.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it?
Uh-huh.
Nothing else?
That's it.
This concludes the public review session for January 29, 2018.